Hi all, welcome to another mega exciting Kingscrusher radio show. So this is Tuesday, 9:10 after Holby City. Okay, we're going to have a look this evening at some notable games of Viktor Korchnoi, who passed away at the age of 85 years old. He was known as one of the greatest uncrowned kings of chess. So what does that mean? Well, he was very close to becoming world chess champion. He challenged 3 times, in fact. He also won the USSR championship 4 times. So he had some similarities with Paul Keres, another uncrowned king of the game. And I thought it might be appropriate to check out some of his games against world chess champions, because it has been noted he's defeated basically 9 world chess champions. They might not have been world chess champions at the time, but let's have a look at some of these key encounters. So one such game is Mikhail Botvinnik in 1960. I've got the game for this. Let's have a look at this. Russia 1960. Okay, Viktor Korchnoi is playing white, and he plays d4. We have knight f6, that's probably not actually a Kobitsa, and other stuff. So c4, Botvinnik chooses potentially the Nimzo Indian if white allows this pin. In fact, white did play knight c3, not fearing the Nimzo Indian. We have e3, the Rubinstein variation. And now, quite often, black castles, plays c5, Botvinnik played b6. Now here, knight e2 is actually very popular, and that's what was chosen. So white avoids structural damage for the moment on c3. And quite often black here plays c5 or bishop a6. This is another alternative, knight e4. We have queen c2, bishop e7, a3, getting that dark square bishop for the moment, but black supporting that e4 square quite firmly. b3. White should be careful here. If he plays f3, this runs into potentially queen h4 check. Might not be working here. In fact, f3 might actually be an almost playable move. What I was thinking was the check here, but in fact white has g3 here. And if knight takes, then there's queen f2. So that's actually maybe playable, f3. Probably black does best to take on c3. This position, it should be okay. Alright, so anyway, b3 is played. Black castles, bishop b2. It's a very modest, if there is an advantage here, it's very modest. d5 now, which, okay, this bishop, is it going to be more important than this bishop? What's the influence of this bishop throughout the course of the game, this b2 bishop? Well, it's tried to be shut out of the game. Black takes on c3 and plays e5. White tries to liberate the diagonal, of course, with f4, but black firmly holds e5 here with knight d7. Bishop d3. So we're looking at mate here if the pawn moves forward. But f5 could be an immediate target. Black provokes, Botvinnik provokes some weaknesses with queen h4. Queen goes back to h6. Now white castles. So potentially this f5 is an issue. Potentially. At the moment the queen on h6 is actually looking at e3. If there's any f takes e, we can take on there. So c6. Trying to break up white's pawn center and liberate that bishop on b7, otherwise it will be stuck here quite firmly behind this pawn. This isn't a pleasant pawn to be stuck behind if we look at this position. Where else is the bishop going to go? So c6, trying to just break the bishop out onto this diagonal. D takes, bishop takes. Now queen c2, looking at f5, this passage on f5. Okay, perhaps e4 is playable here, although it would open up the bishop, but Botvinnik decides against that. Instead, very interesting plan instead, rook a e8. Just giving up f5 seems a bit, you might think this is a bit peculiar. But we have bishop takes f5, okay, so knight c5. Immediately black threatens things like knight takes b3 to drag the queen away from the bishop. So there is pressure. If the bishop routinely goes back, this is the point, it's like a positional pawn sacrifice from Botvinnik. All these pieces seem quite optimal here. If the bishop went back here, I think black's getting some quite vicious play here, potentially. E takes f4 is quite vicious. For example, e takes, rook e3, threatening the bishop and g3. If g3 drops, queen h1, for example, here. It's almost dangerous, rook g3. I'm not sure it's working here. We can double up rooks first. But this sort of thing is fantastic for black. All he's done is sacrifice one pawn, one single pawn, and this does look disastrous now for white. So a routine move would be a disaster. Now it's working here, for example. So you've got to be careful, very careful, when Botvinnik gives you a pawn. He's not just speculating here. This looks extremely dangerous after knight c5. It seems the routine bishop d3 does actually virtually lose. Actually, the engine has this as virtually lost for white, believe it or not. We're talking nearly +4 just on bishop d3, +4. Let's look at this again. E takes, rook takes f4, rook takes again, rook e3, if here, queen h3. We're just looking at down at white's king. It's too much. So something clever is needed here, and white safeguards against knight takes b3 and just leaves the bishop there for the moment. b4 is played. Now if e takes f4, this is interesting. Black could play like this, and it looks dangerous again because there's things like, well, not just hitting the rook, but knight g5. This whole diagonal seems actually pretty dangerous. No, but okay, Botvinnik plays bishop a4, hitting the queen, and you might wonder what's going on here. Well, the queen's trying to hold on to f5. If we move the queen back here, it starts to get a bit annoying. Knight b3 hitting this rook, and then in fact we've got knight d2 as well. If this rook moves, there's knight d2. This is getting ridiculous. White's just all of a sudden just getting a very uncomfortable position. But there is a very strong move in this position. So anywhere else we're just losing that bishop, right? And this is okay for black. This is more than okay for black. But the strong move here, can you guess what white plays? So Korchnoi is playing white. This is against Botvinnik in 1960. This was played in Russia, Moscow, Russia, 1960. So what does Korchnoi play in this position? He's potentially getting kicked around. It's potentially a dangerous pawn sacrifice by Botvinnik that's just been played. So white to play. Any ideas? Can I give you a few seconds? White to play. What would you play here? Yeah, bishop takes h7. Check. Good move. This knight's there. Now if king here, then we've got queen g6. We're going to be forcing black to take this bishop in any case. Because if the knight dare move back here, then this is bad. This is really bad. This position for black. Look at that. It's enormous. That diagonal, absolutely enormous. So after bishop takes h7, white's in the driving seat again. A breath of fresh air. Black takes. The question is this a minuscule advantage because it's opposite card bishops? How small or big is this advantage? Is it really something to celebrate? E takes. Which pawn to take? This one? This one? This one? How? That way? This way? This way? Well, decisions. He actually took on b6. This might, according to the engine, this is actually the strongest one to take here. If he does this, d takes. It looks okay. White's a pawn up opposite colour bishops, but black might have quite significant chances here to draw. So I think what he chose was one of the better ones. C takes b6. Now if black takes, say, this pawn, this doesn't look good for black after rook takes here, and that can be held, that pawn. You know, if rook a8, we can hold that pawn and surround this one, and this is no good. Well, in particular, also there's rook b8 happening. No good. No good. Well, black's just had it here, basically. Eventually, it's gonna be run out of moves. It's not good. So on a take, on this, black took actually on with a takes. We have e takes, and again, it's only like one pawn. Or is it? No, sorry. Pardon me. It's two pawns now. It's 2 pawns now. 2, 5, 3. It's 2 pawns up, opposite colour bishops. Rook e4. Now they're trying to get to that 7th rank. So that would be a small price to play. If we get this 7th rank, that's really quite a massive position. This position can't be held. So black needs to keep control of the e file. King f2. Actually, you'll notice that the bishop's protecting the rook, which affords this move. So it's only a pawn. It's only a pawn up. Rook c1, trying to get to that 7th rank again. That would be very good coordination with these two pieces. Nope. We're going into this bishop and pawn ending. Can white really win this? Well, let's see what happens now. g6, g4, king comes up very aggressively to g5. So there's a 3-to-1 here, basically. So if white plays his cards right, he's gonna create 2 connected passed pawns. Bishop g2 here. Yeah, this is difficult already for black. h4, h5. So we got 2 connected passed pawns now. Yeah, better to leave them connected. Or is it? Actually, the engine likes this as well. G takes. Maybe this is winning as well, actually, to be fair. Because this bishop is really guiding this h pawn, so that's possible as well, it seems. But anyway, this is good as well. But now he's just given up any material advantage, so he's banking on these 2 connected passed pawns. Bishop c3 holds that b pawn. And it's here actually at move 42. This is a classic move number. I think Germans around this move number. I think possibly black just resigns on the Germans. Move 42. So what would be the winning plan? Well, it seems as though, you know, the g-pawn looks quite crushing. I'll just show you a line. Let's just put the king back here to get the g-pawn working. We don't want to allow black to sack the bishop. Let's get this position instead. Try and remove the blockade. This sort of thing, it's going to be a grind, but eventually, if we get this sort of position, kick out the blockaders. Well, black's getting overloaded here. This is just I'm just following an engine path. If we get this position, there's a possibility of a bishop sack, but it's going to be winning if the king comes up to not make the bishop sack, just draw. The king comes up, herding the pawns, just general gist. At this point, f7 will be winning, because then the king's herding that pawn. Okay, that sort of thing anyway. So anyway, 42, bishop c3, Mikhail Botvinnik resigned. Wasn't spectacularly amazing game. It was, you know, it was an end game grind, but they didn't play that many times actually. Korchnoi didn't play that many times with Botvinnik, so I wanted to show a game against Botvinnik, so that was that first one to kick off things. Because I'm looking at world champion encounters or future world champion encounters. So let's have a look at another high level encounter. Okay, Smyslov. Now there's actually Korchnoi did actually some DVDs for Chess Space. So, and there's a sample of this on YouTube. And it's interesting. So Korchnoi is talking at the start of this game, and I was intrigued how the game would carry on, because it's only a sample on YouTube, but it did get my level of intrigue up to hear his actual comments, and I think that's I think that's very nice actually for any grandmaster to do videos for Chess Space as a kind of their legacy. If they look at their most important games, I think it's really nice that we can still hear him and see him on videos. Okay, so let's have a look. He did talk about the start of this game. So this was his first encounter. It's a special first encounter against the superstar Smyslov back in the USSR Championship of 1952. So knight f3 from Smyslov. c5. We go into symmetrical English. d4. c takes, knight takes. g6. Knight c3. Apparently he didn't want white setting up a strong centre with e4, so he plays d5 to try and discourage that, play it like a kind of Grunfeld defence. Bishop g5. White threatens to get a significant advantage here, so this might be one of the better moves. Knight e4 had been suggested by some others, but white can actually, as Korchnoi says, take on here and play knight b5 with a small nagging advantage, and he wanted to avoid this situation because this is a small nagging advantage. There's c7 to deal with, and yeah, this pawn's slightly vulnerable, so there's more weaknesses that are going to be right. This is annoying, this position. He wanted to avoid that sort of thing, so he plays d takes c4 here. e3, bishop g7, bishop takes c4, both sides castle, a6, and apparently queen e2. Apparently Korchnoi had a bad game against Simazhin with queen e2 with a quick e4, e5, but in this game Smyslov played queen b3, which Smyslov later regretted playing. Now, at first, you might think queen b3 does seem kind of usefully annoying to black, that it's stopping the rook moving at the moment. f7's an issue, but in this position, after knight bd7, there's something interesting about this well, when I say interesting, there's something interesting about this position here, that certain of white's pieces, this one, and this one, are actually subject to tempo gains. E5 would kick the knight, queen a5 would hit the bishop, and this bishop generally can be hit with knight b6 with later pressure on it. So all three of these pieces are potentially subject to tempo gains. So although it looks pleasant enough for the moment, this position, there's some dark sides to it. And Korchnoi immediately hits the bishop on g5 with queen a5, bishop h4, knight b6, bishop e2, e5, so another one hit. And black seems to be getting a nice game now, bishop e6. He's developed all his pieces with tempo, and he kind of liked that. And at some point here, Korchnoi actually offered a draw, which had a psychological impact, because Smyslov kind of refused the draw. But Korchnoi assigned that kind of refusal as maybe he was getting something psychologically, in that Smyslov might be concerned about trying to prove why he was better. So some sort of onus, psychological onus of trying to prove that white's better. So Korchnoi did actually offer a draw here, and he is actually in this position. Technically, it does look equal to the engine's eyes anyway, or black's even slightly a bit better. We have queen takes b4, knight takes b4, rook a c8. Black has nice control of c4 here. Now this next move is very committal from black, gaining another tempo on the knight, but it does weaken b5. So a5 hits knight, but it weakens b5. Knight d3. And here the sample DVD on YouTube ended. So it was one of like these books. I remember as a kid, I started reading it. I didn't even know the name of the book after, and I really regretted it. I think it was like 1,000 Leagues Under the Sea, where this guy preparing to go on this fantastic journey. And from the sample on the Chess Space YouTube video, I was intrigued by this game. That's why I'm covering it now. What on earth happened after here? How could black kind of, at least with chess games you can look them up more easily to see what on earth happened here? How did black, what happened here? Okay, the first thing that happened here is knight fd5. So there's some convergence of pressure on c3 clearly, and it looks as though white's going to be suffering immediately, if he's not careful, structural damage, backward pawn. Okay, so has to do something about this, but this bishop's lurking here on this diagonal as well. b2 could be vulnerable, so it doesn't look very pleasant for white, this position. It looks as though there's a lot of pressure on white, and all black's basically sacrificed to get this pressure is, you know, this concession to the b5 square, which doesn't actually mean a great deal. So we see knight takes d5, bishop takes d5, and if you look at black's pieces, they are very aggressively placed. Black does seem to be doing extremely well in this position. He's threatening immediately e4, and then, you know, this diagonal. Maybe plonk the bishop here first, if knight f4. So that's the threat. We see bishop e7, rook takes, another tempo gain. Bishop goes back to a3, but losing a pawn. And you might wonder, was this pawn loss actually forced? Well, let's have a look. Why was the pawn loss forced? Just to rewind, just before we accept that. If we look at this position here, knight takes, if we accept knight takes, this a pawn does seem vulnerable in this position. It does seem a big problem. How does white avoid, in fact, losing material? Because let's say f3, e4. This just looks nasty, because this position we would have things like, well, taking, and if knight takes, we got bishop takes b2. So it looks as though material is going to drop here. Okay, so we'll accept, you know, white had to lose a pawn. So he's going a pawn down here, but it's still, and b2 is still under scrutiny as well. Next for e4, this bishop's going to be on b2. Okay, so bishop d1. The knight goes back, so there's a pawn up, but the position is beautifully together, harmonious here. All of black's pieces are great. This has been a big success against Smyslov. Rook c5, rook d8, threatening bishop c4, or bishop e4, yeah, these are targets. f3, now here apparently bishop h6 is looking strong. For example, here knight c4. That might be one of the more accurate ways of playing it, but it's still okay. Bishop f8, this is good as well. Takes, okay, still a pawn up, but now another pawn bites the dust after bishop takes f3. d3 is going to be taken, and if knight takes, then we just take on d1. So yet another pawn has been won, and attacking two pawns. This is just that small, those issues with the pieces just are leading to quite crumbling, losing pawns. So rook b1, knight c4, takes, still two pawns down. a4, rook d4. Okay, knight g4, threatening mate. Now this pawn goes forward. Knight e5, hitting the bishop, bishop goes there. f5, and he brings his pawns down. And you might think this ending is going to be difficult to win. It's only a pawn up, right? So check. But there is a punchline here in this endgame, so he's not even a pawn up now. But there is a punchline to this, which is maybe you'd find surprising, that it's not about necessarily black here queening a pawn, because it's actually difficult to achieve. And I'll show you. e3, check. There. Okay, he's a pawn up. Yes, he's a pawn up again. But here, the white king has been driven away from the pawns, but the pawns are going to have trouble queening. Because if e2, this wasn't, sorry, white plays the check, it's white's move, yeah. Because rook h8, if e2, there's always the check for the moment. Can't the king actually went to d6. So if king e6 here, e2 is a check, and the rook can get behind, and I don't know, this is going to be the same sort of thing as the game. The point is here that this king's been locked out of protecting these passed pawns, and actually the black king is going to do the work here just to try and get this one, and then go and help the two connected passed pawns. That's the punchline here, and you see that rook h8, e2, rook e8, and then king c6, because the king's being locked out. This king's just going to win this pawn, and then it's going to come back, and it's too little too late for the white pawn and the king. I mean, they can't really do much here. So at move 51 in this game, white resigns this position. His king can't come back. And let's just take an example then. This rook stuck, stopping that pawn queening here. Well, we can even actually do this. That's good enough as well. And rook f1 queening. So that king can't really move. And if a6, yeah, we can just get this, overload white into a zugzwang here. or f3. This is just winning with these two connected pass pawns anyway. Okay, so yeah, it seemed as though he didn't have that, you know, playing black against Smyslov to get that advantage was impressive in this game. It seems White didn't do anything significantly wrong with Queen b3, but it did seem as though White did have pieces that were prone to tempo gaining. So I don't know what you thought of that game. It was quite interesting, wasn't it? So that was his first game against Smyslov, I think. If we look at chess.com for the matches, first decisive game against Smyslov. Just check. And the overall results actually Smyslov had the better of him. Smyslov beat Korchnoi 5-3 with 13 draws, so quite a formidable opponent. But anyway, 1952, the kick-off decisive game was Korchnoi's. That was his kick-off decisive game. Okay, let's have a look at another game then. Against another champion. Let's have a look at Petrosian. Korchnoi against Petrosian. And go to 1974. So this one, 1974. This was in Odessa, 1974. Odessa. Okay. So Korchnoi was playing white, and we have the English opening. Petrosian played knight f6. We have knight c3, e6, knight f3, b6, e4. So Petrosian's being a bit hyper modern here, letting white take the centre. And in fact, the funny thing is, this, you could say this is the Botvinnik system with d3. This structure is a bit like a Botvinnik system. I think you could technically call it a Botvinnik system. So Korchnoi is playing a Botvinnik system. g3, bishop e7. Mind you, the knight's usually on e2 actually, not on f3. Bishop g2. Both sides castle. c5. b3 looks a little bit on the wholesome side. Is white creating weaknesses? Is he creating dark square weaknesses? Is this really justified, you might ask? Knight a6, rook e1. Black locks down the position with e5. Bishop h3, we have knight c7, knight h4, f5 of interest, that's stopped with g6. Knight comes to g2 now, fianchettoing the knight. Knight e6. We have f4, e takes, g takes. Knight h5. Has white overstepped things? Has he got any weaknesses here? What about this diagonal? Isn't this a concern? We have knight d5. Bishop f6 hitting the rook. The rook moves. Check. Knight c7. That knight retreats. Potentially white's got attacking trump cards here. This semi-open g-file, the potential for f5. At the moment this bishop is blunted out of the game on that diagonal. We have knight g7. f5 is played. Knight c e8. Rook f1. It looks as though, hold on a sec, what's going on here? Maybe this knight's going to join. They're going to join up for f6 later. Knight f6. Knight c2, just trying to get rid of that dark square bishop now. Bishop e5, bishop g5. Technically black's okay here, Petrosian's okay at the moment. Queen e8. Knight c e3. We have king h8. Now queen e1, this is a nifty maneuver to get pressure along here and here. Potentially knight f h5. Bishop g4. Rook g8. Black is anticipating they could be using the g-file at some point soon. f6. Knight goes to e6, queen h4. So the rook's ready to use this g-file if it opens up. Knight takes g5. Queen takes. Bishop d4. Okay, is it too dangerous to open up this g-file? That's the thing. Is it too dangerous to take on h5? Isn't this going to backfire? Is black going to somehow double on the g-file? Well, Korchnoi dared to take it. He's known for counter-attacking as well, if needed. So queen takes h5. Yeah, he's allowed black this seemingly dangerous position now. Or is it? Is it dangerous? So black is threatening simply to take on f6, for example. Okay, white to plays knight f5, which looks at knight takes d6 as well as knight takes d4. So if rook takes f6, we can take on d4, hitting that rook, and this position is no good for black because bang, rook takes f7, we're going to be fantastic. So that's too dangerous to take like that, and it's too dangerous to take like this. Knight takes d6, knight takes b7. This is too good for white to accept. So it's tricky for black. He plays actually queen e5, but what does white play here? It's a very nice attacking move. Can you find it? White play and get a good strong attack. Anyone awake? White play here, so a good attacking move. Can you guess? Oh, what was gone? Oh. Any thoughts? What would you play with white? Knight h4. Actually, knight h4 might be a good move. Yeah, give yourself some points for that. If rook takes, yeah, I think that it is interesting. But no, even stronger, this h7 pawn. Forget about f6 at the moment. Rook f3. Just this rook lift. This is really dangerous. So in the game we have. So there's a couple of possibilities. Let's look at a couple of possibilities. If the queen takes or the rook takes. In the game, the rook took. If queen takes, it's all similar idea, rook h3. And we're getting a raging attack. For example, like this. It's becoming a strong attack. In the game, rook takes f6 happens, so we still get this rook left going to here. h6. But here there's a killer move. Simple and strong. Okay, so white's play here, simple and strong. Petrosian hasn't contained his opponent's attack for a change. The almost invincible Petrosian is in severe difficulties, which I don't think he can crawl out of, even with best play, especially after this next move. Petrosian has no escape after this next move. Yeah, Korchnoi plays Queen G5. So he's unveiling, well, this mate threat, and also rook takes h6, among other things. And Petrosian played rook e8, just missing the mate in one. No kidding, no joke. He missed. Apparently, this is the game score. Queen g7 checkmate. But let's have a look. Let's have a look. Why? King h7, Queen g7's mate. Okay. Here, we can just take this and rook f1 will be strong here, with the idea of another rook left, which is difficult to stop. If Queen f6, Queen h5, we've still got this rook left. Or we've got other ideas like knight h6 now as well. Let's go back here. Knight e7, that's not helping. Or the king queen, yeah, there's very little to defend this. Queen e6 does look a little bit ridiculous, but apparently the engine's choice is that as well. If rook f3 here, to protect the rook, that means now that the knight can move attacking the queen, because here it couldn't. Yeah, so by protecting the rook, this possession is just pretty bad. It's just winning material. Check. Yeah, so here Queen g5, how does black defend? He doesn't defend. I mean, the most obvious defensive move, maybe try and give up a pawn and hope for the best, but it just fails. The rook lifting is pretty strong here. The bishop's kind of stuck here. If we play this, check, yeah, check. And if the king can't go anywhere, so Queen e8, check, check, check. That would be giving up the queen. Yeah, there's really no defense after. I mean, you might want more convincing. So I'll call out. Do you want to check any defensive moves here, or do you believe that white is winning? Any defensive ideas? Call them out. Any defense? Are you convinced there's no defense? So the mate in one was allowed, but it's grim anyway. His score against Petrosian overall, by the way, let's have a look at a track record score against Petrosian. Korchnoi against Petrosian. Actually, according to Chess Games.com, he had a plus score. It was 12-11 with 47 draws. 47 draws. Crikey. Anyway, 12-11. Their first encounter, to be fair to Petrosian, was a massacre. We've actually seen that at some point. It's back in 1946. Korchnoi did get a good lesson from Petrosian. He lost in just 23 moves, which I don't really want to recap now because this is, I don't think it's appropriate actually. But they had a good battles with each other. Let's just leave it like that. So let's move on to another champion that Korchnoi played. Spassky, 1956. We can carry on, I think, next week to look at a few more if you would like. So again, Spassky in 1956. Korchnoi was playing white. This was a USSR Championship tournament. So the USSR Championship tournaments are for the 50s, 40s. I mean, they're really worth studying. These USSR Championships are like the elite tournaments. They were like the top tournaments that was happening at the time. So I'm checking them out for as you may know, for the Evolution of Chess Style series, generally USR Championships show where Evolution, or the rising stars, the rising talent, they're going to be appearing in this prestigious tournament. So this was in 1956. So Korchnoi against Spassky. D4 from Korchnoi, knight f6. So this is played in Leningrad. Knight f3, g6, g3, bishop g7. This is actually important from an opening theory perspective, because it's the first time a double fianchetto system, one of the first high-level examples of a double fianchetto system against the King's Indian defence, which in itself was in early infancy in 1956, the King's Indian defence. So d6, we have a double fianchetto, and you might not think, well, has this got a lot of venom, this double fianchetto? Let's have a look what happens here. Spassky played e5, which is relying on a clever trick, actually, a resourceful trick to try and break open some piece activity, namely this pin, now knight g4, to get his pawn back. So he's getting his pawn back, but his centre is a little bit passive. If you look at black's pawn centre, it is a little bit passive. White just castles. So Spassky's employed a tactical trick, but fundamentally his position in the centre, okay, isn't totally brilliant. Knight takes e5, d takes, knight c3. So again, we've got these two double fianchettos, good control of d5, knight d7, queen d2, simply queen d2 here. It looks fairly pleasant for white. White hasn't committed to c4 or anything. In fact, the c pawn is blocked. We have knight f6. And although this might look reasonable for black to exchange of queens to try and equalise, it seems actually this position is actually, well, really, really unpleasant for black. Perhaps it's better not to do this, to just play c6, and it looks terrible in some respects to weaken d6, but this might be a lesser evil. If queen d6, then maybe his is a slight improvement. But let's have a look at the game. That could be a slight improvement, c6, but knight f6 immediately. Korchnoi just took the queens off here, and you might think, well, hang on, what's the problem? One thing you'll notice is c7 is often a problem in these sort of positions. Knight b5 could be a problem. We have rook fd1, so immediately black, what is he doing about this d file? Is he relinquishing it? If he relinquishes the d file, knight b5, bang, what do we do about c7? End of game. End of game. Because here, if we try and defend, well, it's near the end of the game. Knight takes c7 is possible. We're getting to black's back row. Well, more than that, actually. This is winning material, like this. And you might think, hold on a sec, there's other issues in this position as well. I'll check here as well. And this is unpleasant. But also, furthermore, I would just like to just quickly question this. Does this actually work or not? No. Knight d7. Okay, with precise play, white's getting an advantage. Knight d7 is okay for black. Okay, so yeah, this combination works well here with bishop takes e5 to win material for white. So black's got to be extremely careful. He can't just relinquish this d file, it seems. So Spassky takes on d1, but it's just helping white. Rook takes d1. It's an unpleasant position because this and this are just really unpleasant. They have to be dealt with somehow. If you try and stop this being checked with bishop f8, it's just either knight b5 or rook d8 is really strong here. And we're looking at e5 as well, of course. And we're looking at rook d8. It's just unpleasant. more than unpleasant. It's losing. So in this position, Spassky tries to keep things active with bishop f5, but he's dropping b7 now. So really, I mean, this is just at move 15. This is a major success for white. This opening, it's been a major success. He hasn't done anything spectacular, but bishop takes b7, bishop takes c2, rook c1, bishop goes back, knight b5 finally. This c7 and also e5 is hit. It's really unpleasant. Black tries bishop h6. The rook moves to c4. So again, these two pawns are just hanging. Bishop e6. We have rook a4. Another pawn is hanging. So we've got 3 pawns hanging now. Why have 2 pawns hanging when you can have 3? Okay, rook d8. Black is threatening potentially bishop h3 to try and get some tricks. For example, then f3, there's bishop e3 mating. Okay, but bishop takes e5 is possible here. That knocks out control of d4. So if bishop h3 now, and there's rook d4, we've just knocked out control of d4. So it's pretty hopeless now for black. Just to show you that if he hadn't taken that pawn, say he does this, it's greedy. Is this winning for black? Bishop h3, is that winning for black? No, rook a8. It's a really bad position. It's not even winning for black, bishop h3, even there. Okay, you can just take that. Even that's really good. Okay, so bishop takes e5 is also really good. Okay, check. King g2, rook c1, bishop f3. So black's still got pawns about to drop off. Knight d5. Now, is there any tricks here? There does seem to be some latent tactical tricks actually in this position, like knight e3. This looks very naughty. I think this is very naughty stuff. Yeah, I think if we take on a7, I mean, almost knight e3 looks, I don't know. No, it doesn't actually work. No, because there's rook a8. Doesn't work. It's backfiring on the black king. Just wondering, is Spassky playing for some traps here, but it doesn't seem to be. So knight d4 is played. Rook takes a7 again is another just strong materialistic, but it breaks through to black's king. But there's also, you know, knight d4 is also another strong move. So we've still got rook takes a7. I don't think this knight e3 does anything here either. Let's have a quick check. In the game, bishop g7 was played. If knight e3 here, yeah, we're just going to take off e6. So there's no mate for it. Just take off e6. Then we've got a3. So they both work. Both rook a7, takes a7, knight d4 both work. There's no attack here. There's no attack. There's no traps that are working. Bishop g7. Bishop takes, king takes. So 2 pawns down. We have king f6. Just simplify, knight takes. Rook a5. Knight goes c3. a4. This bishop's guiding this a pawn. e5. And here against the e4, just pinning the knight is good enough. And here, move 30, Spassky resigned. It doesn't matter about any tactical tricks now, like knight takes e2, because you know takes. We're just going to be queening this a pawn for sure, aren't we? a5, a6. The pawn's queening, so it doesn't matter about knight takes e2 or anything. Here we just move the a pawn. Check. Move the a pawn. We're going to be winning the knight anyway. Yeah. So the double fianchetto, and apparently, you know, inspired quite a lot of other people to take up this double fianchetto variation. So White had avoided playing that c4 early on, but still got a really excellent position. So yeah, that's sort of an influence on opening theory a bit. The double fianchetto there. Okay, I think those are the 4 games I wanted to go over actually at this point. But if there's interest, we could have a look at another 4 key games next week. But those are the ones I looked at earlier, and I thought were, you know, quite interesting. So I hope you got something from that. And okay, would you like to carry on next week? Just say, and we can carry on looking at Korchnoi next week. Don't have to take it all in one go. But rest in peace, Viktor Korchnoi, a major influence in chess. Such a long, successful career. Okay. So possibly we'll do another session next week. And so have a good week. And right, yeah, comments or questions on YouTube. Okay. Thanks very much. Oh, please remember to like the video if you got anything out of it. Likes are really appreciated. Yeah. So likes are appreciated. All right. Thanks very much.